Thank you very much. Okay, the title of my talk that I gave a long time ago was Investigating the Impact of a Flipped Online Exchange in Teacher Education. But as I was working on it, two events have converged, and in a way, kind of, this presentation has taken its own characteristics, its own personality. And these two events is one that you asked me to do this talk, and then the other one is that I'm up for a post in about a month's time in which I have to present my entire teaching trajectory, which has really forced me to look backwards. So this has kind of converged and brought me to a point where I said, I need to go backwards. And then a third event that happened, which is a little bit embarrassing, but more personal. I was talking to some students about some early technology that I used, and I mentioned modem, and I mentioned WebQuest, and they're like, huh? So I thought it was important to, at least some of you are going to recognize this, but I don't know what your ages are here. So I want to just take a few minutes to look back. Okay, so we'll start with this. Okay. So with that brief introduction, of course, I've reconstructed that first chat, but I had a student in 2004. We started planning a collaboration between a colleague in the US whom I had never met and a colleague in Turkey whom I had never met face to face. And we contacted each other. We actually used telephones to start talking about this. And as you can see, the technology was very basic. And we had a student come in. His name was Christian. And he came in and he said, strangest thing happened when I contacted the partner you gave me, and I said, hello, I'm Christian, and she answered back saying what her religion is. Why did she do that? So it was the start of a very interesting exploration into this whole idea. Internet was so new at that time, this whole idea of what things can emerge through this use of a connection that today we take so much for granted nowadays. I've also set up this other very short video. Oh, it's not playing. Well, for some reason that one's not playing. It played earlier with us, didn't it? It worked
on the full screen. You might need
no,
to.
Well, it doesn't matter because all I was doing was showing some of the earlier technology that we used. And as you can see, this computer, it's absolutely prehistoric. It's from a museum. We had to wheel it into the classroom. We had one computer. We did not have Moodle. We created our own virtual learning environment. And so I did a short video that doesn't show here, but it doesn't matter, of the way that in that first decade, the technology slowly evolved towards much more connection and much easier, more user-friendly technology. And by 2009, I believe it was, we were taking, when I say we, the partner in the US, the partner in Turkey, we did not continue the collaboration beyond 3 years, but with the partner in the US, we began in 2000, started working together in 2003, and it's been sustained up until now, 2002. So 2 decades of a partnership, it's due to his wonderful wife that we're still together, because she's his rock and helps us get over all our difficulties of this 2-decade partnership. And so by 2009, we were already beginning to work in virtual worlds, in Second Life, and this is what I was showing here. So after that first decade, we did a study that I'm going to briefly give a survey of here. In 2010, we revised with quantitative and qualitative data from past years, which included surveys, it included institutional questionnaires, student portfolios that we had been collecting over time, starting in the first year, exam results, and we just kind of looked back to see how things had gone. And oh, the pain of reflecting. What we found was that the students did say things like, oh, it was fun, it was exciting, it was collaborative, it was challenging, cool, different. But we also found that they did not really display, we could not find evidence of rich development of professional knowledge. The reflection was, for us, superficial at most. Little or no display of procedural knowledge in what they were describing, or how they were answering in the emails, what they were describing in their portfolios, and very little or no display of critical application of this knowledge based on their own observations. So despite, for example, that what seemed like a very motivating discussion of different intercultural aspects of language learning, most of it was just saying, oh, this could be nice to use with students, without any real reflection of how to actually use it. So we were looking back, we were saying, okay, we know that this is working, but it's not working quite as well as we would like. So we did our own reflection, came up with some conclusions, painful as they were, that students seemed to view it as something extra. It was just something more that we, as 2 teachers who were working together, had kind of thrown at them. But the main focus, the most important part of the learning in our classes was what, for my students, what I'm teaching them, and for his students, what he was teaching them. There was little sense of responsibility for the other, little sense of actually, well, I'm in charge of, or I should be helping the other learner in that other group to develop. There was a little sense of this, the many aspects that are so necessary for the collaborative learning that we were looking for. And as I said, we felt we didn't see them really being able to transfer what they were experiencing through this collaboration into their own teaching, which is obviously quite disappointing. So we thought about it and we said, okay, what can we do? What seems to be wrong? And we came up with some ideas that perhaps the tasks were too vague, especially in what they were having to do together. They were not clearly related to the whole course. It was, as they had indicated, something extra, something to add on. It wasn't a holistic part of our teaching. So there was this lack of symbiosis, and we saw the need to put more emphasis on them and the importance of the global, not just on the local. So we needed both teachers to be reference. And we also felt that there was a lack of discussion of the expectations of what this whole thing was. It's not just something that you do and then you forget about it, or if it doesn't work, it's not that important. It was important. It was extremely relevant for us that they understand that it's as important that you work well with your online peer as you do with your peer in the classroom, and that the teacher who was not your assigned teacher at your university was a referent as much as the student that was the teacher that was in at your university. So after this first decade of this, in what was becoming an increasing focus on technology, we're beginning to see that, well, okay, even though this technology is there, it's all they're really learning is technology and not the actual pedagogical construct, or and not actually changing their own pedagogical paradigms in what they're learning. One example is what we were seeing, for example, for instance, if I would give feedback on the projects that they were collaborating on together, because we asked them to create their own collaborative projects together, if I would get feedback to my students, then they would go and talk to their groups, and the others would then go and complain to the colleague saying, she's coming in and she's interfering, and vice versa. So we could clearly see that both the students were seeing it as something completely separate from what we were actually trying to teach. So this was the beginnings of a new framework, which was, as I said, started around 2010, and it's still ongoing, where we meet every year to revise, to refine. We call it the FIT model, for no particular reason, because of all of these three elements, the flipped part, the in-class part, and the telecollaboration part, are as important. But the reason we call it FIT is because it sounds better FIT than TIFF or ITIF. So that's the only reason. It's not that there's some sort of order to this. So the flipped is more the area of this focus on, you need to be prepared as an individual. So you're going to have work that you're going to be doing outside of class time that might be preparation for the in-class, might be preparation for the group work that's being done online. But in any case, it's important that you be prepared for it, which then goes into in-class or maybe telecollaboration. It was hard to get a design here that actually showed how it should be moving into both of these areas. But the in-class, because of using the flipped, the in-class was allowing us a lot more time for in-depth discussion, focus on theoretical understanding, and even local contextualization. So such as peer teaching of what they're developing together as a group online with their international groups. And then, of course, the telecollaboration became a central pillar to what we were trying to accomplish with this course. Okay, so some critical changes. How did we get this? How did we get into this model? The two classes became one course design. Now, it's important to highlight here, my course is a fourth year undergraduate course for future teachers, pre-service teachers, and my colleague in the US is actually a master's course. So we are talking about the complete integration of two different levels of courses. It was not an easy task, and we were told it couldn't be done, but we did it. So we have, apart from the few weeks where there is, due to time, the calendar, he starts his class earlier. They start in August, I start in September. Apart from, and then I finish up later. Apart from this time frame when we're not overlapping, the program is the same. We write it together. It's the same activities, it's the same content, it's the same evaluation criteria. It's absolutely all together. So it is a co-constructed course. So that was one of the key aspects of changes, because what we were doing earlier was I designed my course, and then there was some telecollaboration, and we would look and see what we'd have in common and put that part that was in common into the telecollaboration. And that's no longer the case. It is now completely co-designed. Second critical change was this holistic role of telecollaboration. So there's an increased amount of the collaborative work is taking place between distant peers, whereas it used to be that most of the collaborative work was with peers in the local classroom. It's no longer the case. There's an increased amount of collaborative learning online. In fact, we've looked at it. It's hard to quantify this, but we figure it's about 75% of all collaborative work is taking place between the online peers. So as you can see here, telecollaboration has shifted from being peripheral to being the central nexus, or one of the central nexuses for the learning process. And then another critical change is the need, the idea that we need to give them clear expectations, goals, and evaluation criteria. And I know that all of this has been said before, and when you read about this, this is what they say you have to do, but we weren't really doing it. So we had to set up some very clear expectations of what we expected from them. What is good telecollaborative activity? So we based ourselves, we looked at looking at criteria for collaborative learning and adapted it to telecollaborative learning. And we made some permanently available instructions for all activities online, so that they can go back, look and see what they have to do, what's coming up, where it will be fit, and where it fits into the programming. And because we're putting so much emphasis on this, on telecollaboration as being a key aspect of their learning, we created a telecollaborative contract that they're allowed. They have the option of not signing if they don't want to, but until now we've never had a student who has never signed. And this criteria then is used for what is the another aspect that I'll talk about in a minute, which is continuous assessment. Another critical change was, as I've already mentioned, the flipped classroom, and a move towards making students much more responsible for being prepared. They can no longer come into the classroom and not have read whatever you assign them. If they don't, then they end up, it doesn't, for us, it doesn't matter. You assign some reading, or you assign a video to watch, and they come into class, they haven't looked at it, you're going to give your class anyway. It's no big deal. But if this flipped content is part of the preparation for them to go into a smaller online group where they're the ones who have been assigned, and they're the only ones who have been assigned to read a certain text or to watch a video, which will then contribute to the construction of whatever activity they're doing in a small group of 5 or 6. If they haven't done it, then it does matter. And it was a way of shifting the responsibility that we're always looking for, this learner autonomy, this learning to learn, et cetera, et cetera. It was, we used the this pillar of telecollaboration as a way as of also shifting the responsibility of being autonomous to the students. And I'll talk about that hopefully, if I have time, in a little bit more detail. So we saw the importance of this flipped, which did come at a later time. This flip model didn't just emerge in one year. So the flipped part did actually come in at a later time, and we wrote a second contract that they also have to sign, which is about being responsible as an individual. So we had the first telecollaborative contract that we developed, I think it was around 2006, 5, 6, and then this flipped one then came a little bit later. But so they're signing within the first week of this course, they're signing these contracts, which then the criteria becomes part of their assessment for the course. So here we come, continuous assessment. As I said, the descriptors from the contracts are used as a basis for both self and peer evaluation. And that's become also a key feature of some of our research that we've done throughout the years on this as well. There is immediate assessment after each online review, each online meeting. It's short, it's quick, but they have to immediately assess self and other. And there's also, of course, assessment in class through exit slips, sometimes exit slips for activities that we do as whole group, both groups online as well. And this self-assessment and continuous assessment, which is cumulative scores, then becomes an identifiable role in the final assessment, and it counts quite a bit for the percentages. And it's what we say to them, you know, participation. If you're online and we're not in that meeting, we can't know what you do. It's got to be someone else who tells us how well you do this. And again, it is a way of shifting the responsibility from being prepared, from taking part, from taking initiative, from just going into class. You read or you didn't read the materials. They now are really feeling it in their skin. What it feels like to go into a group meeting and being the only one who hasn't read what you had to read, or hasn't looked at the video, or hasn't prepared the questions that they had to prepare, or hasn't looked up the information that you've been requested to look up, et cetera, et cetera. So we have found, I'll talk about this in the research, we have found that this is one of a key feature, this shift of telecollaboration and of making the more responsible elements of the learning being outside the classroom. It's not an easy thing to do. It means letting go of control. Never an easy thing for a teacher to do. I'm open to questions towards the end. I think that we can, there's time for us to ask questions, for you to pose any questions. And I'm sure I'm just kind of going over this, and I've just lost an entire decade or 2 decades of development of a model. So I'm sure that there are a lot of questions, a lot of aspects that I've left out, but I'm more than open to questions towards the end. So please just write them down. So I've said what we did, and I want to just go over a few key points of how we did it. Those of you who know me and my colleague, you may recognize my colleague, my attempt at humorous depiction of my colleague, who's Dr. Randall Sadler in the US. This is in theory him. And he's the techno guy. He's a self-admitted nerd and gets upset with me sometimes when I know less about the technology. So that comic is supposed to sort of capture that aspect of our personalities there. So there is a method to our madness, sort of, maybe, and I'm going to try to explain that. As I said, there were very explicit instructions, and this means, and this is one of the most difficult parts, and it's one of the most tedious parts of the entire FIT model that I'm presenting here. It means a lot of planning, because you have to know blow by blow what you're expecting your students to do the entire semester. But they need to see that, and they need to see how with time, because maybe there's a lot of reading that they have to do, and some people are fast readers, some people are slow readers, or maybe there's a lot of things they have to explore. They need to be able, if we're promoting learner autonomy, we need to also promote that they are able to arrange their time and manage their own administration of the learning materials. So explicit instructions. As I mentioned, the immediate and continuous assessment, and we used a lot of different formats. At the time that we started, rubrics were not that popular. They've become very, very popular now, but when we first started, rubrics were not that popular. So writing the descriptors was not something that came to us naturally. We've gotten better at it, I think. But as I said, they have immediate feedback. They receive immediate feedback from their meetings, but they also get feedback in class as well. And there's also, as I've mentioned before, lots of self-reflection. We've tried different formats. We've done written journals, we've done video journals, we've done podcasts, we've done I think we did a Twitter journal at one year. That one didn't go very well. So we've tried a lot of different formats, but there needs to be, the focus is always on self-reflection of what they're learning. And then, as I said as well, points 3 and 4, we co-construct the core materials and we co-teach. And here you have some examples. The very early, the Powtoon there was one of the first materials we developed, I think around 2005, that one. But then you have also a picture, some more recent iterations from last year where we did co-teaching and co-tutorials. We met together to give them feedback on their projects they were developing. This was really, really important because we were finding that students were complaining about the input that the other teacher would give. And so maybe they would get some feedback that was a little bit negative from me, the students in one project. And so his students would go and complain to him from that group saying, oh, who does she think she is? And vice versa. So we started doing co-tutorials together regarding feedback. We didn't feedback, and it's always signed by both of us. If it's a written feedback, it's signed by both of us. If it's oral feedback, we try to do it together. Now, I have to admit, I have an advantage here. I live in Barcelona. He lives in Chicago. So in my classes, luckily, are in the afternoon. So I'm not the one that has to get up at 4:30 in the morning for these tutorials. I don't know how we would do it if it was me that had to do that. But he's a trooper and gets up really early sometimes to co-teach with me. And we have also started opening up the classroom. You can see this poster is the composite that I did of a recent technology fair where the students in groups had to explore tools, and we pushed them to not come with tools that everyone's already seen. They have to explore tools that are vanguard, tools that are high impact and not usually seen in education. And then we do a tutorial together online, sort of it's a technology fair, and we invite external observers as well. So in a way, they participate in the groups. What you see here is them presenting their technology that they've explored. They have to give they have to explain what the technology is, explain how it works, and then give some ideas, some pedagogical ideas about how they might use it. And that's just one aspect of what they have to do in this co-constructed and co-written curriculum. But you can see the notion is, what I'm trying to get across here is how what started out as a very sort of limited limited interaction between some students on a very almost superficial level and with superficial focus has little by little become an integral part of the entire curriculum. And it's also little by little opening out even further. We're bringing in, it's not just us anymore, we bring in experts, as I said, for this sort of virtual conference that they did last year, we invited people to come and visit and to participate in the conference, or the technology fair as we called it as well. And that's been going for 2 years. And who knows what we'll do next year. So a final point that I want to really bring home here is that we had to make sure that they see the connections. We see the connections. We see, because we're working together and we're starting months ahead of time in our planning, and we see how all of this is going to lead them, and why it's so necessary to have these three central components to what is the FIT model. But we also realized it was really, really important that they see that as well. And I want to just go into a little detail to show you. If you see here, for example, there's a preparation for an online activity in their instructions. I said they had to have explicit instructions. So it's saying, follow the interactive document. And I think we did it on ThingLink, which is there's a lot of new technologies now for hotspots and whatnot. So it was an interactive document with the hotspots. And they had, through that, to answer some questions, individualized questions that were then going to come into their 4th online meeting. So you can see, we didn't say that right explicitly there, but they were responsible for having done that before their meeting online. And then in class, we were doing a discussion of a case study, which they had looked at in one of their groups earlier. So you can see kind of how this is all tying in. So the discussion of the case study, it also went into the fourth online meeting. So you can see that there's the flipped activities, there's the individual responsibility of looking at individually assigned work, plus some discussions that we had in class that we knew these discussions, the summaries would then go into, as you can see, the meeting online, which was about learning styles. The interactive document was about different learning styles, and the in-class discussion of the case studies were also about learning styles. So then in their meeting, they were bringing all of that together to integrate this into, I believe the activity was make sure you've covered every learning style at some point in your project. And so they were revising at that point their projects and looking at making sure that they had covered all the learning styles. So that's an overview. I've gone back to the back to the prehistoric times, as my son calls it. And I'm also showing you pretty much my age here, and I'm an old dinosaur at this. So as you can imagine, we've had quite a few qualitative studies have come over the 2 decades that we've been working together. You have some examples of some of the stuff we've collected, and I want to excuse me. I want to start with. I want to look in particular at one of them that was a study that was based on. I apologize for the pronunciation if I'm not correct. Kumaredevalu. His model of 2012, commonly known as CARDS, and his proposal is that teaching competence, teacher knowledge has got 5 central components: knowing, analyzing, recognizing, doing, and seeing. And then there's some subcomponents. I don't want to go into the model here because it would just take us too long to look at, but we used some of these subcomponents that we felt could be made visible or are visible in student output to do an analysis. And again, I'm just going to go over the main points here, synthesizing. So we looked at year 1, year 5, and year 9, and we had in year 1 35 student reports. We didn't call them journals, because it was written at the end. That's why we're calling them student reports. We didn't at that time. We weren't asking for a reflective journal. We started that later. Then in year 5 we had 42 journals, and then in year 9 we have 38 journals. So if you look at the color code, you can see in year 1 that most of the discussion is based on reference to personal knowledge, very little reference to procedural knowledge or professional knowledge, very little, there's no recognition. It's very limited results as far as what they were including in their student reports. And then by year 9, and with the 38 journals, we're beginning to see, looking at these journals, we're seeing a lot more referencing to both personal, procedural, and professional, referencing to learning opportunities of themselves or of their students, a lot of more recognition, reference to mimicry of authoritative voices, but also critical reflection on those discourses. And we're seeing some reference to transferal in their own context, and we'll look at that an example further on, and much more analysis. So that's just a quick synthesis of that study. Then a more recent study that we did, we've collected where I think I've come to the conclusion that we hoard data. We are definitely data hoarders. We always ask for permission beforehand to collect the data, and just to mention that. But we have video recordings of in-class discussions and recordings. We also asked the groups to do the video recordings as a small group. Some groups don't accept that, some do. So again, it has to be unanimous. So we don't have all the groups, but we have quite a few of the groups usually say yes. We have the individual reflections, and we have peer evaluations across the board, all the peer evaluations that I'm talking about, at group reflections, because we did, after 2010, begin also not only having individual reflections, but asking for them to also do group reflections, a sort of a group diary, and the final projects. And the final projects are very elaborate, very, some of them we've actually published. They're extremely, some of them extremely well-developed telecollaborative projects. And so with all of this data, we selected 2 students. We decided to call Carlos and Alicia, that we could shadow in a way, whose trajectory. And why these 2? Because they were regularly provided their input. They were from the same class, and they had similar educational backgrounds, similar linguistic backgrounds, and they were comparable data, because one of them was consistently marked high in collaboration by the peers, by his peers, because it was Carlos. I'll go ahead and say that, because you'll see that in a minute. And then Alicia began with low peer evaluations. So in this first blog, I mentioned here the first evaluations took place during the initial phase of the course, which was aimed to foment interdependence and more autonomous learning. And what I mean by that was, you can see this institutionalized pressure through whole group marks. This is where we're much more assessment and intensive at the beginning, because what happens? Students come in, we've assigned them something, they're used to, if I don't read it, it doesn't really matter. I go to class, teacher's going to explain it anyway. Instead of that, they find that they haven't read it. They're paired up with someone else to discuss what they should have read, and they have to admit that they didn't read it. And then that peer is unable to continue or to do what they had to do, so that peer gives them a low mark. So this is what we mean by this institutionalized pressure. The first activities are set up in a way that the assessment can really hurt. It can be painful. What the students don't know is that we routinely drop the lowest marks in the peer assessment, because we know what's going to happen. We're aware of this, and we're not trying to penalize them. We're trying to get them used to a certain type of responsibility. So it's important to note that this is in the beginning phase, and you can notice that Carlos mentions it's scary. The responsibility here is scary, and this is a word. Scary and stressed are words that come out a lot in the journals, especially in the beginning. So here you have first evaluations. They're already they're feeling it. They're feeling the pressure. And in a private email, Alicia expressed anger and concern because she got low marks. And she wrote was my student, she wrote to me saying, I don't think this is fair. I don't like being judged. So she was very negative, and she was quite upset because she was a student who was used to getting always very high marks in everything she did. So in that same phase, in the first self-evaluation, both subjects scored themselves quite high, 9 to 10 in all the categories. Here you an example of the self-evaluation form. But by the second evaluation, and following these low online peer evaluations, Alicia marked herself much lower, 7 to 8 across the board, and even a 6 in learner autonomy. Okay, so this is in the first phase. But then by the end of the course, end of the semester, so we've got approximately 10 weeks of collaborative time together. It is Alicia who has became notably more participative, both in class and online, and this was reflected in the peer evaluations. And she also I could see through the recordings that she was taking much more initiative as a group leader. And interestingly, I love this the excerpt because it's her that is actually championing the idea of peer assessment as a way to scaffold learner autonomy and supporting teacher improvement strategies. So if you can see in the last line 160, she says, line 158, well, going back, if you receive, then you have to give back. You got to give feedback. And if you don't improve, what's the point? Which then became the title of one of our articles recently. So you can see, in a way, the evolution that we were looking for in this shift in the paradigm, or we think we can see it, maybe you don't agree, but we feel that we can see this sort of evolution of an acceptance of the learner autonomy and responsibility for their own learning. So we're fairly convinced that we're on the right path, but we've got some more anecdotes, I guess you could. It is anecdotal in the end because it's an individual case, but we did find that Alicia was also brought this up, the idea of peer reflection, of group being feedback very important, and that it is an aspect that helps students improve. So it wasn't her self-reflection, but what intrigued us even more was that these concepts were then integrated into her internship teaching plans in the next semester. She was no longer in our course. And as you can see in her blog, she mentions that this is her teaching internship blog that was next in the next course. She mentions that it all started when coursing the TEPBL subject. That's the subject we're talking about, technology enhanced project-based language learning. In my group, I met another colleague who was motivated about telecollaborative techniques. Since then, we had been always joking about working telecollaboratively together, but when it came time to plan our implementation for Practicum 5, we sat down and took it seriously. And they did work together to do a telecollaborative project in their internship in the next semester, which was all very motivating for us as teachers. But that brings us to the question of the Holy Grail. Right. Okay. So we can see some evolution in what they're doing. I don't know. Am I running out of time? Am I okay with time?
You have 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay.
10 more minutes. That's it.
All right. Okay. So as you can see, the Holy Grail of teacher education, we're seeing evolution in what we feel we're teaching. We're seeing evolution, and we feel we see an evolution in the way students are beginning to accept more responsibilities as learners. But what about after they leave, right? So that's always that big question. So we came up with a mixed method study in conjunction with a PhD student. And what we did, I pulled down 517 contact emails from students from the time we started this telecollaboration up to, I think it was 2016 or 17 at the time. We've gotten more information since then. And there was possible contact, there was a list of 517 students. It's mind-blowing. And then the PhD student did an intensive search of trying to see if she could find where these people were now through social media, going through emails. She used the old emails, of course. A lot of them no longer are no longer even valid emails. Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and came up with 164 potential candidates because some of the names were fairly common names and we couldn't be sure. So she would compare and see if it looked like what they were talking about was education. Then she contacted them, asked them if are you this person who graduated from this course in such and such a year? And of those 164, 64 people responded. Then of those 64 that responded, 54 agreed to do a general survey, just sort of a use or non-use of telecollaboration, how they use it, if they're using it. And this was all compiled data in a a qualitative database, and she used deduce to then make correlations. And of these, the ones who said, these 5419 former students agreed to in-depth interviews. And this analysis is still ongoing. Okay, of course, we recognize there's a lot of limitations to this, the numerous difficulties in contacting former students. And we also could not include the UIUC students because, or my colleague students from the US, because he did not have this information. It's self-selected because there is obviously, if former students who engage in social media is common to telecollaboration, doing this technology. So in a way, there's this self-selected bias in the people who are answering. And we have no data as to whether those who did not respond, perhaps it's because they're no longer teaching, right? So they may not be interested because they're no longer teaching. So there are considerable limitations. These are the three that for the moment stand out. First, we'll look at the numbers of respondents who answered affirmatively regarding the virtual exchange or telecollaboration experiences. 54 respondents, plus we had one additional informant who joined later. And out of the 54 respondents, 20 said they used telecollaboration. And of these 20, 11 had less than 5 years of teaching experience. And 4 of the former students stated that they had helped other teachers set up telecollaboration, even though they had initially responded, they did not do telecollaboration. And of these 4, 1 had less than 5 years experience. Now, if we parse these numbers a bit more, 20 out of 55 former students carrying out telecollaboration. At first, we were disappointed. We said, gosh, that's less than 36, that's 36%. That's, isn't that for nothing, right? But if we add the 4 respondents who indicated that they had initially said no, but then they explained these experiences that they'd had with virtual exchange, even though they'd said no, then the total number rises to 44%. And then we started looking at it again. And of these who said, who had said no, we have to take out 14 students who are away on Erasmus, and they did not take part in our course. And we had not eliminated them before, but we then eliminated them from these numbers. And that means then our numbers now reach 59%. So it's a little bit better than that first 36%. But what we think is more important than all of this is that significantly from this total of the ones who said yes, half of them were teachers with less than 5 years experience, which is the most intensive moment of making this whole model, the whole idea of telecollaboration and autonomy is much more intense in these years than in the previous years, okay? And we would also mention that notably in Spain, it can take years to get a permanent teaching post. So many of these students who are saying yes, they're doing it, they are doing it as substitute teachers. So we feel that this is a significant and very relevant aspect or outcome that we're seeing. Now, if we look at the numbers linked to participants who stated that they had not taken part in any form of virtual exchange, which was 35, 16 who said no indicated that they plan to try VE in their future. And 9 of these 16 had graduated less than 5 years ago, and 5 indicated that they had tried to implement a telecollaborative project, but could not for varying reasons, lack of resources, funding, support. And of these 5, 3 had less than 5 years of experience. 2 said they were not interested in VE at all. We don't know exactly why. We need to look into that. And 4 said they did not feel confident enough to try VE. Now, regarding those who had carried out VE, 100% of those who had said yes said they would do it again. And 52 of those claimed that they felt inspired by previous participation in telecollaboration as a student or based on their own experience. 0 reported any difficulties with task design. And you got to, again, you can see how much emphasis we put on learning to design telecollaboration projects. And those who encountered difficulties reported being very resourceful and having creative ways to resolve these difficulties, which is another aspect that we're trying to teach them in this course. So I think it's relevant to bear in mind some of these things, but what I would highlight the most, I've already mentioned these other ideas of students, a lot of these respondents don't have job security, they're working in large classrooms, poor technology infrastructure. But I would highlight that most of those who said that they would do were doing telecollaboration had less than 5 years experience. Some excerpts from interviews very quickly. They were motivated despite difficulties. So we have one who said she had to chase her partner, but she'd still do it again. And her partner was a non-trained partner, someone she had found outside of class. Other one mentioned that she had problems with timetable, but note that she was working with a former peer and they were able to work it out. So because one of her classmates had moved to England, and so they set up a telecollaboration that way. Another one said that she would do it again. She had helped teachers, but she would definitely do it again. And then we have one who went to eTwinning, which is we have them explore eTwinning and have them explore the platform, have them explore the projects that are there, and she was able to find a partner there. And she also said she'd definitely do it again. So these are just some of the quick overview of the interviews. So pedagogical implications and future directions, full integration, holistic perspectives, triangulation, more cooperation between teaching faculty and training centers. We had our practicum students involved also in the schools doing telecollaboration, where we were doing it as research. More expert, non-expert dialogue, and the need to harness these hard-earned gains. There have been a niche of researchers working in this type of work, and then along comes the pandemic, and it's almost as if everything we've done, yeah, listen to this, right? We also need to know what should be sustained from what we've learned in our research, and what should we leave behind, what's no longer relevant. Finally, I want to just say none of this is new. I've been saying a lot of this. I said this in 2005. It's up to the teacher who's designing the task. It was 2005. I said it again in 2007. Students are learning from this. They're learning, they can see there's a positive attitude, but we've got to bring it into the teaching education. I said it again in 2008. The collaborative process between the teachers is ignored. It's not enough just to focus on the students. We also got to focus on how they learn to become collaborative partners themselves. I say it again in 2015, teachers are going to be facing new frontiers, new horizons that they cannot even imagine. I said this in 2015. I said it again in 2022, or I said it just a few months ago, and it's about to come out. So none of this is new, but I know I'm stating the obvious. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Okay, and it's never been more evident that this is needed. There's been a lot of good work going on. Many teachers have increased because of COVID. You know, it took, I guess, a world crisis for us to really say, yeah, we need this. We need to revolutionize teaching and learning. And I'm not trying to belittle the gains that have come about because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's not just the techno-pedagogical know-how. There's a need to push beyond these parameters of merely thinking about the technological teacher know-how, and to recognize that there's new paradigms. We're going to have teachers, we're going to have students who are more tech savvy than us. We have to be, as teachers, being willing to move outside of our comfort zone, explore technologies that we don't like artificial intelligence, big data, because this is the only way to move forward, I believe. I was scared of technology with the first You saw the first video when we first started this module. Technology scared me. I was very hesitant, but it's the only way forward, I think. So with that, I would highlight in particular the last reference here. It was very, for me, this book was very influential and had a big impact on the way I started seeing my own teaching. So I highly recommend this book and a more recent one that he has that I can't remember right now. Anyway, this is all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melinda.
I hope I haven't bored everyone out of their minds.
No. It was very interesting from a number of perspectives, but I won't say much first, but of course you can see probably the claps there. There was something for all of us, I think, and I think it was a great idea that you walked us through your journey from the very beginning and then brought it into context. Of course, I have comments and questions, and I'm curious about a couple of things, but of course, I will leave the floor to the audience first. So please type your name to the chat box if you want to make a comment or ask a question. And then based on that order in the chat box, we can take comments and questions. And it's okay that in the first 1 or 2 minutes, we won't have many names appearing there. It will take some time. People are processing it now, but
yeah, it's 2 decades.
But just to give people some time to think about their questions and then formulate their questions and comments. The longitudinal aspect is one of the things that was really fascinating, going back to students who have been involved in this and then finding them and then asking. But beyond that, there's also this aspect of diffusion of innovation that my colleague Numa Marquis has been researching and then talking about a lot. So you are curious about the fact that the teachers who were involved in it are using it in the future as well. And then you got some responses to that. And of course, as you mentioned, there's a bias for that too. You can only reach to those who are still there on social media that you can reach. But I think it's very important that we take that that longitudinal perspective as well. What you do, how it is diffused over time, if it's taken up by teachers as they keep working, and then how it is done as well.
I want to just say, we don't claim responsibility for all of that. Obviously, I mean, the situation has changed. It's much easier than when we started out. When we started out before Skype, we started out before Facebook even, and things are easier, so it's easier to get started on this. What we'd like to look at more in depth, and what we were seeing in the interviews, is that we are seeing that they seem to feel more prepared. And I think that's key. It's not so much whether they're doing it or not, it's whether they feel like it's a success and whether they feel like they have the tools to do it. Mm-hmm. I think that's another aspect. I mean, we cannot claim by any means that we're the reason for this, right? Obviously, it's much easier now.
Definitely, I think, pull the trigger at some point. And
I hope.
I'm sure it has been very useful for many teachers. There's I think there's someone who wants to comment, as I can see from the chat box. Jeanette, are you there? Can you make yourself heard? Yes, I can see you. Can you unmute yourself? Maybe your mic is muted. Nope.
No, I think she just disappeared.
We can continue with Karin, and then Jeanette would come back after that.
No, thank you very much for that talk. That was really inspiring and interesting. I was really intrigued about the the sort of peer reviewing that went on after each class, how students evaluate each other, and I was wondering, you know, how you had the example of Carlos and Alicia, and Alicia really improved both in her attitude and in her work through this process. But I was wondering about Carlos, the one who was, you know, a good student with a good attitude from the start. What did anything, you know, how did the process affect him, if at all?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Carlos was an exceptional student to start with. I have to say, he was a mature student and came back late into teaching, so he was an exceptional student. What we did see, he always got very high marks, and I also have to say, with the peer assessment, it's very infrequent that students give their peers low marks. So the fact that she was getting a low mark meant that she was not doing anything at all. Okay, let's be honest. Students do not like giving each other peer yeah. So this is one of the reasons why with the as I said earlier, we try to use the peer assessment in a way that they're pressured to have to give each other bad marks. We set these activities up so that if they have not done what they had to do, the rest of the group cannot continue. And that's a painful lesson to learn, and it's mean on our behalf. And I recognize that it's tough love sort of attitude. So I just wanted to clarify that. The fact that Alicia was getting such bad marks was very unusual. And she was one of the easiest ones to pick out. The rest of them, what Carlos did was something very interesting. We give them quite a bit of leeway as to how they're going to do some of their self-assessment. And he and another student decided to become study buddies. And they would get together, and their reflective journal was meeting online to talk to each other about what they felt they had learned and what they understood and what they didn't understand. And they submitted these talks to us. And I haven't done that much of an in-depth study on this because I was looking more at the other student. But you can see he also begins to integrate discussion of the need for peer assessment, the need for peer assessment in their projects. So I do think that it has helped, but he started with such a high mark. Yeah, it would be hard. It's hard to use that as a factor to discuss his evolution.
Yeah, I was just curious because it's a known fact that you can't improve. I mean, it's harder to help good students to improve if you also have to focus on sort of helping the weaker students, and it's a dilemma that I'm just interested in. So, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Karin. Any other questions? I can see Ufuk's name on the chat box. Ufuk Palaman.
I think that Jeanette is back as well.
Yeah, Jeanette might go. No, still no song.
No.
Maybe you can write to the chat box.
Right, maybe there's a connection problem. But then, no, we can't hear you, Janet, I'm sorry. Maybe we can proceed with Ufuk now, and then maybe Janet will sort out the problem.
Hello. Thank you very much, Melinda, for this inspiring talk, as usual. It was great to see and hear the details. I have multiple questions, if I may.
Let's start with
maybe I missed.
See what happens.
Yeah, I'll try to combine all of them, and you won't tell the difference. So maybe I missed the part that some parts of the talk because there was some connection problem. You talked about collecting data after graduation, and I was wondering if you also collected data during the pandemic, and did you have a chance to compare like any increase in the teachers' implementation of virtual exchange projects? And also in relation to that, do you also have access to their like target age groups? I mean, where are they teaching? At what level are they teaching? So this will be the first question.
This is work that I'm going to be brutally honest. This work is being collected. The data was collected by PhD students, so someone else was doing the grunt work on this. So no, we have not accessed the data from the pandemic because the collection of the data stopped in 2018. Then we had 2019. 2019, I was doing other things. I wasn't collecting, and no, we haven't looked. That's a very, very good question and worth going back and looking at. However, judging from what I'm seeing, I don't know that there would be a lot of students from the pandemic who would be hired right now. Just seeing the panorama in general about employment, I'm not sure if that would be very productive, but it's definitely a good question and worth looking into. Thank you. Target age groups. Though my students were all studying to become teachers of primary ed, so they're all in primary ed. Some do a little bit of teaching in early childhood. We have some examples of very few, but we have a couple of examples of projects working with very young language learners, age 5, telecollaboration, and a few are in private teaching. But yes, we do have that data. The ones who were willing to provide that information, not all of them did. But and again, I repeat, the newer students, most of them are substitutes. So they're not in any permanent place. I don't know if I answered your questions, but
yeah, thank you.
You had it more?
I have, but I'm just waiting for
you can
go ahead.
You can shoot.
Okay. Well, most of the telecollaboration projects that you presented include some project-based component or like task-based component, but we're also kind of witnessing an increase in facilitated dialogues. So I was just I just want to hear how you see it. I mean, what are the synergies or differences, or do you see one more useful than the other? Or do you see them as two different camps, like task-based versus facilitated dialogue?
Okay, that's a loaded question. We have some experts in the field here. We present our students. We don't give them a choice. We tell them it has to be a project, an entire project. I am more inclined towards this type of work. I feel that if you're going to bring in something that is so laborious, such as a telecollaborative project, and working in particular with young language learners in primary, that it's not something you're going to do in one day. It's not something you're going to do in one afternoon. It's not something you're going to do even in 1 week. That it needs to be more scaffolded, and it needs to be on a long-term basis of, you've got lots of preparation. You've got the idea of introducing them to the whole concept of talking to someone else. You need to find an excuse for them to talk to someone else. So obviously, for me, tasks are integral to project, right? But we don't give them a choice. We tell them that they are developing project-based projects. Project-based. Well, it's a project, and it's an entire unit. It must cover minimum of 6 sessions minimally. And we lately we've been trying to push them, going with the facilitated dialogue. We've been trying to push them to find topics that are socially oriented. So questions of contamination, questions of refugees, questions of, they choose, obviously, gender comes up a lot. Okay, so the idea of facilitating dialogue, that's difficult when you're talking about primary ed students who in many cases are not, cannot carry on sustained conversation about opinions. But we also promote a lot of plurilingual aspects, that there's no reason why this cannot be interdisciplinary and plurilingual. Right, so we push that as well. I don't know if I answered your question, but I would just mention one anecdote. We had a student who graduated, I can't remember what year. She left Spain and went to Myanmar and ended up working in a refugee camp and started a telecollaborative project with adult refugees who were studying in the refugee camp to become English as foreign language teachers. She started a telecollaborative project with a primary ed class, so that the primary ed students were giving feedback to the materials development that these teachers of English as foreign language were studying in Myanmar. And it was just a mind-blowing project. And it, in a way, came from a project she had written the year before. So we really push for projects. And that's a personal stance more than anything else. I know I'm not saying that one is better than the other, though. But I feel that the integrated part, if it's integrated, it needs to be long term, I think. It has to be, it can't be done one day, right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
And also, if we are talking about telecollaborative projects for teacher education, like the ones that you have facilitated also, there is this element of course, 2 different curricula going parallel. And then you would probably encounter many problems in that as well. So, I mean, judging from experience working in Sweden, if you want to change a component in a course, then that's a big issue. And you have to make sure that that's online with the learning objectives, and then that has to go in parallel with the other institution as well. It will have to be meaningful for the student teachers there. It will have to be meaningful for them here. So the planning part, once it's set, I think it might be very productive. And then also, this being within the field of teacher education also brings in some political and curricular limitations. For example, if you are following the curriculum in language education in Sweden, in teacher education, which you have to, like there's no option, basically you have to do that, then those curricular goals for example, upper secondary school have to be parallel to what's going on in Denmark, in Turkey, in Spain, etc. So a whole and fully fledged, comprehensive, parallel curricula is not easy to attain. And I know that from experience also, in some countries, you have more flexibility as a course leader, as a course lecturer. You can just change the syllabus just like that. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But you know, these limitations are there and they are very obvious. But you can find that ground where it can go parallel. I think it would be magic.
Yeah, exactly. But that is a key to telecollaboration, is comparing the curriculums and finding the common ground, and then building on that common ground. Yeah, I completely agree. Yes. Yes. I'm not sure if that was a question. No.
No.
Oh, okay.
Not. All right. I'm checking. I don't think that there are any more questions here. I'm checking. Marwa has a question. I know that Marwa is working on project-based learning in classrooms, so that might be.
Yes, but the question is not about that. Well, thank you so much, Melinda. It was really interesting and inspiring. I just have a question about, towards the end of your presentation, you said something that we need to revolutionize teaching and learning. And my question is exactly about that. I mean, do you mean that we need to design courses in which we use more technological tools, or design courses that are specifically targeted to teaching how to use technology in teaching and learning? Or perhaps probably both. I mean, they do not need to stand in contracts with each other. So yes, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I probably should not have used the word revolutionize. Okay, I was getting towards the end of the.
It's a good word, though.
Yeah, I said it, and yeah, that's a very loaded word. So, no, I think there's a new term now called techno-pedagogical knowledge, right? And the idea is that it brings both together. But in any case, I don't feel like that's enough. It took me decades to finally realize that the whole thing is that you've got to be willing to let go, and that's such a hard thing to do. So the idea of planning was just brought up, and I can't highlight that enough, because once you've done the planning, you let go. And that's where I think the revolution comes, is the sense that you've got to trust that your planning and the students are going to go with the materials and the content and the scaffolding and the guidance you're giving them. But you've got to let go. You can't control what they're doing in their groups. It can easily be a disaster, right? You can't control that they're actually doing what they're supposed to do with the flipped instructions. They may not be doing it. There's only so many points of contact where you can actually see what they're doing, because you have opened up completely to the idea that the most important part of what they're learning is not in front of me in the classroom. And that's, I think, the key element to the revolution that I'm talking about, is when you realize you're not the key person. You're not central to it anymore. Yeah, it's such a hard thing for a teacher to do.
It's difficult to
right?
let go power, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of that paradigm shift that I'm talking about. It's not just knowing how to use technology, because I mean, technology is going to, obviously it's very, very important, but our students are going to be more tech savvy than we are. So that, they can always teach us. That's what our whole the technology fair is about, is them teaching us. And we walk away like, oh, that's so cool, let's try that next year, So this is where we're getting a lot of our ideas for the following year. But I think that the paradigm, the paradigmatic shift is saying, yeah, I'm not that important anymore. And that's a scary thing, especially when we're hearing this talk about teachers going to be replaced with artificial intelligence. And I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but some things are going to change. Some things are going to change. And we are no longer going to be that central element that we always have been for centuries. I think that's where I was meaning the revolution will come from. Yeah. It's personal, again, it's a personal opinion. I just based on my intuition of these 2 years, the 2 decades.
I think we have a question written down by Janet. She's wondering about the necessity of the instructor's presence, basically, in online communities. So should they even be there? And I think that's a bit connected to what you have just said, Melinda.
Exactly. I think that if you've set it up in a way if you've done the planning you need to do, and you've set up the strategies, and the explicit instructions is also very important, then your role, you can fade into the background. You really can. But it's not an easy balance, because too much, and I think this goes back to Karen's question, too much learner autonomy creates learner anxiety. We've also found that. It's something else we should probably be doing more study on. Learner anxiety is, okay, where's my teacher? I need, am I doing it right? What? Yes, but what final mark am I going to get? This is great. I'm learning lots, but what's my final mark? I mean, this focus. They want to know what they're doing, what their final mark's going to be, and how it's going to affect their final mark. And that's something that needs a lot more investigation, I think, a lot more research. Is how do you find that balance between learner autonomy, which is what they need, and learner anxiety? Mm-hmm. Okay, so.
Well, thank you very much, Melinda. If there are no other questions or comments, I think we will stop here for today. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. And I know that
walk down memory lane, you mean?
No, this was really very relevant to all of us. And I know that we will see you again, maybe in 2022 for a future conference in Barcelona. And you can see in the chat box that people are saying thank you. I can see Ufuk promoting a data session that will take place at Human Research Center. And then there's a link to that, so you can click on that and enjoy a data session on English as a medium of instruction, as far as I remember. So you can send an email to Ufuk Palaman as well about that. But thank you very much, Melinda, and thank you all for your participation. We will be together, if you will and want to join, next week with Chris Jenks from University of Aalborg in Denmark, with another interesting talk reflecting his also teaching experiences in Denmark in the last year. And then some of you may know his classroom discourse and conversation analysis based research, but also his research on online interaction as well. See you next time.
An inspiration to me, as I just want to take this opportunity to say you've always been, Dr. Jenks, an inspiration for me. So thank you. Will you send me information about this?
I will
link?
definitely do that. And then you can send it to Gripe Research Group as well, so that we can have the more the merrier, I would say. So
thank you.
As we say in
Sweden, to everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, Melinda.
Bye.